On 14th July, PM Modi participated in the first I2U2 Leaders Summit, along with US President Joe Biden, PM of Israel Yair Lapid, and the President of UAE, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Just when the summit was ongoing, reports came about the Adani Group's acquisition of the Haifa Port for a price much higher than what the government of Israel had expected. So is this just a business deal or there is something more to it? We'll discuss all this in detail in this video, along with its historical significance and India's connection to Haifa, and also about the I2U2 and the changing geopolitics of the Middle East. Hello guys, I am Saurav and welcome to the Arc. Before getting into the strategic importance of the Haifa port, let's first discuss about the recently conducted I2U2 summit, its framework and objective, and we'll establish its connection to the Haifa port later. So I2U2 stands for India, Israel, USA and UAE. This was a grouping that was conceptualized during the meeting of the foreign ministers of the four countries held in October 2021. The group is broadly aimed at encouraging joint investments in 6 mutually identified areas, that is, water, energy, transportation, space, health, and food security. The group is now being called as the West Asian Quad, which was mentioned by the US NSA just before the summit. He said, "And we think I2U2 can become a feature of the broader region, just as the Quad has become a central pillar of the Indo-Pacific strategy of the United States." It's important to mention here that the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or the Quad, is a strategic alliance of Australia, India, Japan and the US. It's however different than the I2U2 in a sense that the Quad is primarily focused to counter China, both diplomatically and militarily, in the Indo-Pacific region. But in case of I2U2, whether Israel and the UAE are going to come on board with respect to countering China's influence in the Middle East region is yet to be seen. Also, for the I2U2 countries, it's difficult to expect agreement on Iran and Russia considering India's relations with the two countries. But it's a no-brainer that the US's push in formation of these groups like I2U2, Quad, AUKUS has a common thread, and that common thread is China. Since the signing of Abraham Accords in August 2020 and Israel's normalization of diplomatic relations with the UAE and Bahrain, it has opened up new possibilities of regional cooperation, and India plays a vital role in Israel and the UAE coming together in such an arrangement with the US, considering India's good relations with both the countries. The four countries coming together to form a strategic partnership is a remarkable geopolitical development, and India's Adani Group getting to operate Israel's Haifa port is also an important piece of a bigger strategic puzzle. Adani Ports and Special Economic Zone Limited, or the APSEZ Limited, is owned by Asia's richest person, Gautam Adani, and is currently India's biggest private port operator. With 13 ports and terminals, the Adani Group controls India's 24% of port capacity. From east to west, Adani Group operates ports in Dhamra, Odisha, Gangavaram Port, Vizag Terminal, and Krishnapatnam Port in Andhra Pradesh, Kattupalli Port and Ennore Terminal in Tamil Nadu, Vizhinjam Port in Kerala, Murmugaon Terminal in Goa, Dighi Port in Maharashtra, Hazira Port, Dahej Port, Tuna Terminal, and finally India's largest private port, that is Mundra Port in the state of Gujarat. These ports not only serve India but also serve as gateway to Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and the entire ASEAN region. Adani now wants to expand its global footprint and wants to become world's largest port company by 2030. Last year, the group set up a wholly owned holding company in Singapore to pursue global port opportunities. As far as global projects are concerned, Adani Group won the Yangon International Terminal project in Myanmar in 2020, but the project has run into troubled waters due to political instability in the country and US sanctions. Similarly, last year, a consortium with Adani Ports as the majority shareholder was awarded the project to develop the West Container Terminal of Colombo Port in Sri Lanka for a period of 35 years, while the East Container Terminal is being developed by the Chinese state-run firm CHEC. Adani Ports owns and operates the Abort Point terminal in Queensland, Australia. It also has signed an MOU with MMC Port Holdings, Malaysia's largest port operating group, to develop a container port in Carey Island, Malaysia, and is in talks with many Southeast Asian countries to develop ports and terminals. But why Haifa Port? On 14th July, Israeli media reported that the privatization of Haifa Port was awarded to the consortium consisting of the Indian conglomerate Adani Group and Israel's chemical and logistics company Gado, which certainly has no relations with her. The consortium will pay 4.1 billion shekels, or approximately $1.18 billion US. Adani Group holds 70% stake in the consortium, and its Israeli partner the rest 30%. The new consortium will operate the port till 2054. According to reports, the government of Israel was expecting around 3 billion shekels for the deal, and the price of 4.1 billion shekels is way above the industry standards, which clearly implies the nature of the acquisition as a strategic one. Now, what makes the port strategic? Take a look at the port itself. Haifa Port is the largest seaport in Israel, and also is one of the largest ports in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea, with a handling capacity of 30 MMT of cargo per annum. Israel's geography allows most of its foreign trade in goods through its seaports. These ports handle around 99% of the country's import and export cargoes. Haifa Port is a strategic investment, and it's pivotal to Adani Group's global ambitions to expand its footprint, opening the door into Europe and beyond through the busy and lucrative Mediterranean region. Partnership with Israel's Gado Group is also significant, as the Gado Group is engaged in the business of ports and terminals for chemical and lubricants distribution in Israel and Northwest Europe. I2U2 and India, Israel and UAE coming together is not merely a coincidence. Post the COVID-19 pandemic and now the Russia-Ukraine war and the resultant supply chain disruptions, the world has realized the harsh realities of overdependence on China. India now wants to fill the gaps as part of the global supply chain network, and connectivity plays an important role in that. Joint infrastructure projects to improve connectivity may lead to multimodal India-Arab-Mediterranean corridor, as proposed by Professor Michael Tanchum in his paper, which has been linked in the description. The corridor will link Indian ports in the west like Mumbai and Mundra to the ports in the UAE like Jebel Ali. From there, goods can be transported by rail via Saudi Arabia and Jordan to Israel's Mediterranean port of Haifa. From Haifa, the entire Mediterranean region comes within reach. In his research paper published in August 2021, Professor Tanchum suggests the Trans-Mediterranean Maritime Link from Haifa to the European mainland at the massive transshipment port in Piraeus, Greece, means Indian goods shipped to the UAE's ports will be able to reach major markets and manufacturing centers of Europe. He further adds, from Mumbai, Indian goods shipped via this multimodal route could arrive on the European mainland in as little as 10 days, 40% faster than via the Suez Canal maritime route. This corridor has tremendous trade potential and geopolitical significance. India and UAE signed the free trade agreement in February this year. India is also negotiating with Israel and the EU to sign an FTA. The announcement of the UAE's decision to invest $2 billion to develop a series of integrated port parks across India and Adani getting the Haifa port in the backdrop of I2U2 summit are indicative of bigger things to come. Meanwhile, the Chinese presence in the Middle East is increasing. UAE signed a 35-year concession agreement with China Ocean Shipping Company to develop a new container terminal in Haifa Port. Apart from this, there have been significant Chinese investments and trade deals in the UAE under China's flagship Belt and Road Initiative. Increasing Chinese influence has caused some concerns in the US. As far as Israel is concerned, the US is wary of increasing bilateral relations between China and Israel, and also of significant Chinese investment in Israel. Chinese company SIPG built a new port in Haifa called the Haifa Bay Port at an estimated cost of $1.7 billion, which it will operate for 25 years. This new port, as you can see, is just a few kilometers away from the Haifa port and is even directly visible from it. The Adani Group led consortium in Haifa will directly compete with the Chinese run port for business. The US, however, has been displeased with a Chinese state-run company operating a port just a kilometer away from the docks where US naval warships anchor when they visit Haifa, because of any Chinese surveillance equipment that could be installed in the vicinity. It was also reported last year that Israel turned down an American request for inspection of the new Chinese-built Haifa port for presence of any surveillance equipment. Now it has become interesting with India's Adani Group and China's SIPG operating two ports side by side, with US Navy's presence in the region. There is some historical perspective to Haifa and India's role there. During the First World War, in 1918, the city of Haifa was held by the German Ottoman forces. Because of the strategic location of Haifa, it served as a supply base due to the presence of harbour and rails. For the Allied forces, capturing the city was very important. The responsibility to annex Haifa was on 15th Cavalry Brigade of the British Empire, which consisted of 3 Indian cavalry regiments, that is Hyderabad, Mysore and Jodhpur Lancers. On 23rd September 1918, the Indian cavalry soldiers riding on their horses, equipped only with swords and lances, charged the enemy positions firing machine guns and artillery. In a valiant effort, the brave Indian soldiers defeated the German and Ottoman soldiers and captured the city. They lost their Major Dalpat Singh, who earned his military cross because of his bravery, and later anointed as the hero of Haifa. So to sum it up, Haifa's strategic location is going to be an advantage for India to easily access the European markets. It is expected that new infrastructure projects in the region are going to be launched in the near future to build on this strategic partnership started with the I2U2 summit. US and India's involvement in the Middle East is certainly going to increase in the future as a counter to China's Belt and Road Initiative. How the geopolitics in the region evolves in the coming days, we have to wait and see. I hope you liked the video. I hope to see you soon with a new and interesting video. Thank you.